We live in a culture that teaches us to chase results, to climb ladders, check boxes, impress bosses, and push productivity to its limits. From an early age, we're trained to pour energy into what we do. We go to school to get a job. We work to earn money. We hustle for promotions, recognition, and titles. And none of that is inherently wrong, but it's incomplete. Because the truth is, you can work your entire life on your job and still feel like something is missing. See, there's a difference between your job and yourself. Your job is what you do, but yourself is who you are. And when we put all our effort into one and neglect the other, we start to lose a sense of meaning. You've probably seen it, the high performer who gets everything done on paper, yet deep down feels anxious, disconnected, maybe even a little empty. Because effort without alignment leads to burnout. Achievement without self-awareness leads to confusion. And success without inner growth feels hollow. Working harder on yourself than on your job doesn't mean you stop caring about performance. It means you realize that performance is only one part of the equation. You realize that your job is just the stage. You are the actor. And if the actor hasn't rehearsed, if the actor hasn't studied their own motivations, beliefs, fears, and values, then the performance, no matter how technically sound, falls flat. Think about this. Your job can be taken away, your title can change, your company can restructure, the market can crash, but who you are, your character, your mindset, your ability to lead yourself, that's something no one can take. That's your foundation. And if you neglect that, you risk building your life on something fragile. We admire people who seem grounded, people who carry themselves with clarity, confidence, and calm, not because of what they do, but because of how they show up. They're steady in chaos, kind under pressure, focused without being frantic. That doesn't come from reading a job manual or attending a training workshop. That comes from inner work, from reflection, from asking hard questions like, what do I really value? What kind of person do I want to be? What am I afraid of? What am I avoiding? But here's the challenge. Inner work is invisible. No one gives you a raise for becoming more self-aware. You don't get applause for learning how to manage your emotions or admit when you're wrong. You don't get a certificate for being honest with yourself. And because of that, most people skip it. They focus on what the world rewards. But just because it's invisible doesn't mean it's not essential. And let me tell you what happens when you start working harder on yourself than on your job. Your job actually improves. When you grow, everything you touch grows. You start to make decisions not just for short-term gain, but with long-term wisdom. You communicate more clearly because you learn how to listen, not just to others, but to your own instincts. You stop reacting from ego and start responding from purpose. You show up differently, and people notice. But growth isn't always comfortable. Working on yourself means facing things you'd rather avoid. It means admitting where you've played small. It means learning to say no, even when it's unpopular. It means investing time in your values, your health, your relationships, your curiosity. Things that don't show up on a spreadsheet, but shape the quality of your life. I once asked a CEO what the biggest mistake he made early in his career was. He said, I spent the first 10 years trying to prove I was good enough. I spent the next 10 trying to figure out who I actually was. That's the difference. Proving versus becoming. One leads to exhaustion, the other leads to growth. And you don't have to wait for a crisis to begin that journey. You don't need to burn out to realize that your worth isn't tied to your productivity. You can choose now to pause, to reflect, to get curious about yourself. Read the books, take the walks, ask the questions, listen to feedback, learn how to sit with discomfort instead of avoiding it. That's not soft, that's strength. Because when you know yourself, you become harder to shake. You're not just reacting to the world, you're grounded in something deeper. There's a story I love about a builder who was known for his beautiful homes. One day he told his crew he was retiring. His boss asked him to build one last house. Reluctantly, the builder agreed. But his heart wasn't in it. He cut corners, used cheaper materials, and rushed the job. When it was done, the boss handed him the keys and said, "This is your house. It's our gift to you." The builder was stunned. He realized he had just built the home he would live in with half-hearted effort. The same is true of our lives. We build them every day with our thoughts, our habits, our choices. If we only work hard on the outside, we might end up living in the life we don't love. But when we work harder on ourselves, we build something stronger, something that lasts. So yes, work hard on your job, be excellent, be dependable, be disciplined, but work even harder on yourself. Because at the end of the day, you are the one showing up to every meeting, every conversation, every decision. And the more you grow, the more everything around you begins to align. Not because the world changed, but because you did. They're not the things that hold value, they are the measures we fail to meet. We often get praised for what we do well, the tasks we finish, the targets we hit, the results we deliver, and that's fair. We live in a world that measures performance, and performance is important. But over time, we start to confuse skills with substance. Keep your key skills are what gets you in the room, they earn you a seat at the table. But what keeps you there, what helps you rise, what builds trust, what creates impact, is not just what you can do, it's how you carry yourself. It's how you think, how you listen, how you handle pressure, and how you show up when no one is watching. That's self-leadership. And that's what truly separates people who contribute from people who elevate. You can be the smartest person in the room and still struggle to lead. Because leadership isn't about having all the answers, it's about asking better questions. It's not about being the loudest voice, it's about knowing when to speak and when to stay silent. It's about clarity, empathy, consistency, and conviction, none of which are taught in a training manual. You don't download these traits like software. You develop them slowly through self-awareness, reflection, and responsibility. We've all seen people who are brilliant at their jobs, but difficult to work with. They know their craft inside and out, and yet they create friction wherever they go. Their technical skills are undeniable, but their emotional intelligence is underdeveloped. They lead with ego instead of service, with control instead of trust, with fear instead of vision. And eventually they hit a wall. Because talent may get you started, but only self-leadership can sustain you. When you work harder on your job than on yourself, you become excellent at your role, but blind to your growth. You might be advancing in your title while declining in your awareness. That's a dangerous imbalance. Because the world doesn't just need people who are capable, it needs people who are conscious. People who know how to navigate complexity, not just fix problems. People who take ownership, not just credit. People who ask, how can I grow, not just what can I get. It's easy to focus on external metrics. That's what gets rewarded. But leadership, real leadership, starts internally. Before you can lead others, you have to learn how to lead yourself. That means managing your emotions instead of letting them manage you. It means making decisions from values, not moods. It means showing up on your hard days with integrity, not excuses. It means understanding that your presence is your message. How you listen, how you treat others, how you take responsibility, that's what people remember. That's what people follow. You don't need a title to be a leader. You need a mirror. And the courage to look into it with honesty. The best leaders I know are obsessed with learning, not just professionally, but personally. They read, they reflect, they ask for feedback. They're not afraid of their flaws, they're curious about them. They don't hide their mistakes, they own them, because they understand something most people miss. Leadership is not about being perfect, it's about being real. And being real requires work. It requires taking time to understand what drives you, to notice your patterns, to recognize your reactions, to ask yourself, what am I like when things don't go my way? How do I treat people who can't help me? What do I do when I feel threatened? These questions are not easy, but they're essential because the version of you that shows up under pressure, that's the real you. That's the person others will experience the most. And if you haven't worked on yourself, if you haven't built a foundation of character and clarity, then your instincts may end up doing more harm than good. We tend to think of leadership as a role we step into, but the truth is it's something we grow into. And that growth is internal. It happens in the conversations you have with yourself, in the discipline you practice when no one is watching, in the humility you embrace when you realize you still have a lot to learn. One of the most powerful things you can do is develop the ability to pause. Not just to think, but to reflect, to slow down enough to notice your intentions, to consider the impact of your words, to choose how you respond instead of reacting from habit. That's the difference between someone who knows their job and someone who knows themselves. The workplace is full of people with talents, but the ones who change things, who inspire, who build, who elevate, are the ones who lead themselves first. They take responsibility for their energy, they ask better questions, they listen longer, they reflect deeper. They don't just deliver results, they develop people. Starting with themselves. So yes, continue sharpening your skills. Get better at your craft, but don't stop there. Learn to manage your mind. Learn to connect with your heart. Learn to lead your own behavior before trying to influence anyone else's. Because people will follow your example long before they follow your instructions. When you work harder on yourself than on your job, something interesting happens. You become the kind of person others want to work with, not because you're the smartest, but because you're steady, you're clear, you're kind. You're someone who makes others feel seen, heard, and valued. And in a world full of noise, that's a rare and powerful thing. At the end of the day, your job might describe what you do, but yourself, your character, your values, your growth, that determines how you do it. And how you do it is what the world will remember. There's a moment that happens quietly, often in the middle of a busy week, a quiet evening, or a long commute. A moment when you pause just for a second and think, is this it? You've been pushing hard, showing up, checking the boxes, doing what's asked, but somewhere beneath the noise you feel a gap, a sense of fatigue, of distance from yourself. You might not even know why. After all, everything on the outside looks fine. You're performing, producing, delivering, but inside, it's a different story. That feeling isn't laziness. It isn't weakness. It's a signal, a quiet invitation to pay attention to something deeper, your inner world. Because when you work only on your job and never on yourself, that imbalance catches up with you. You can't outrun it with more hours or hide it behind achievement. Sooner or later it shows up in your energy, your relationships, your health, your sense of joy. See, that's what we call burnout. But the real danger isn't just the exhaustion, it's the disconnection that causes disconnection from meaning, from values, from self. Most of us were raised to value productivity. We were taught that working hard is noble, that long hours are a badge of honor. And in many ways, hard work is admirable. But not all hard work is equal. You can spend your life working hard on the wrong things, on trying to prove your worth, on chasing external success, on staying busy so you don't have to feel what's really going on. And when you do that, something essential begins to erode. We weren't designed to be machines. We're human beings. We have thoughts, emotions, needs, limits. And when we ignore those truths, we don't become more effective, we become more fragile. That's the irony. The harder you push without care, the more you break. Working on yourself means recognizing that inner strength is not about grinding through everything. It's about knowing what matters and what doesn't. It's about having the clarity to choose where your energy goes and the courage to protect it. Burnout isn't just a result of doing too much. It's often the result of doing too little of what makes you feel alive. Too little purpose, too little reflection, too little alignment. You're not tired because you're weak, you're tired because you've been operating disconnected from the things that fuel you. When all your effort goes into your job and none into your soul, eventually the job starts to drain you, not develop you. This isn't just about mental health, it's about sustainable performance. If you want to show up consistently, if you want to be resilient, creative, focused, and present, you need to nurture the source of all that, yourself. That's not selfish, that's strategic, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. And the people around you, your team, your family, your community, need you not just to be effective, but to be whole. So the question becomes, when was the last time you checked in with yourself? Not your schedule, not your deadlines. You. When did you last ask, how am I really doing? What do I need to feel grounded? What brings me energy? What takes it away? These aren't fluffy questions, they're foundational. Because self-awareness isn't a luxury, it's the root of every wise decision, every strong boundary, every moment of authentic leadership. Too often we try to solve inner problems with outer solutions. We get overwhelmed, so we work harder. We feel disconnected, so we chase more titles or change jobs. But without inner clarity, we end up recreating the same patterns in new places. It's like switching seats on a sinking ship. The environment changes, but the outcome doesn't. True change starts within. That's why working harder on yourself is not optional, it's essential. It's what allows you to stop reacting and start responding, to stop surviving and start leading, to move from anxiety to alignment. And here's the beautiful part. When you begin to invest in your inner world, everything around you starts to shift. Your relationships deepen, your focus sharpens, your creativity expands. Because you're no longer just operating from pressure, you're rooted in purpose. This doesn't mean you have to overhaul your life overnight. It means you start to make different choices. Maybe it's taking 10 minutes in the morning to breathe and reset instead of rushing into your inbox. Maybe it's having a hard conversation you've been avoiding because clarity is more important than comfort. Maybe it's choosing rest not as a reward but as a responsibility. Maybe it's giving yourself permission to say, I don't know, or I need help, or this isn't working for me anymore. These aren't signs of weakness, they're signs of leadership. Because leaders are not people who have it all together. They're people who are willing to be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. They lead not from perfection, but from presence. And presence requires attention to yourself first. I once met a leader who said something that stuck with me. He said, I used to think my job was to hold everything together. Now I realize my job is to hold myself together so I can be there for others. That shift changed everything for him. And it can change everything for us too. So the next time you feel like something's off, even if you can't quite name it, don't just push through. Don't just work harder on the task in front of you. Pause, breathe. Ask yourself what part of you might need attention, healing, or care. That moment of awareness might be the most productive thing you do all day. Because your job is important, your responsibilities matter, but you are the engine behind it all. And if you don't take care of the engine, it doesn't matter how fast you try to drive. The world tells you to grind harder, but wisdom whispers go inward. Not to escape your work, but to deepen it. Not to quit the game, but to play it better. Not to avoid stress, but to meet it with strength. So if you're tired, don't just sleep. Reflect. If you're overwhelmed, don't just cancel meetings. Get curious. And if you're burning out, don't just rest. Realign. Because when you work harder on yourself than your job, you don't just survive, you lead. You lead from truth, from calm, from depth. And that kind of leadership, that's what the world needs most. You can be doing everything right, showing up on time, hitting your goals, getting praise from your peers, and still feel lost, still feel like something is missing. It's a strange feeling because from the outside things look good, but on the inside you can't shake the question, why doesn't this feel as fulfilling as it should? The answer is often simpler than we expect, and yet harder to act on. It's because we've been taught to focus on how to do things, but not why we do them. We're taught to develop skills, chase promotions, and hit KPIs, but rarely are we encouraged to stop and ask ourselves, is this aligned with who I am? Is this the direction I truly want to go? When you don't have a strong sense of direction for yourself, when you haven't done the inner work of identifying your values, your purpose, your definition of success, then you start borrowing someone else's. You start living a life based on someone else's expectations, someone else's standards. And that's when the disconnect begins. You see, your job can give you structure, but it cannot give you meaning. Your manager can give you tasks, but they cannot give you purpose. That has to come from within, and the only way to find it is to start working on yourself. More intentionally, more consistently, and more deeply than you work on anything else. Purpose is not a task you check off. It's a compass you carry with you. It doesn't always shout, Often it whispers, but you can't hear it if your mind is constantly noisy, constantly chasing, constantly performing for applause that never seems to satisfy. You have to slow down long enough to listen. And listening, really listening to yourself is some of the hardest work there is. Because when you do, you'll start to notice things. You'll notice where your values are being compromised. You'll notice where you're pretending to care about things you don't. You'll notice where you're staying silent when your heart is telling you to speak. You'll notice how many of your choices are driven by fear of disappointing others, of failing, of being misunderstood. All right. That kind of awareness is uncomfortable, but it's also freeing. Because once you see it, you can choose something different. You can start designing your life from the inside out instead of reacting to the world around you. Direction isn't about knowing exactly where you'll be in 5 years. It's about knowing what you stand for today. It's about knowing what kind of person you want to be, not just when things are going well, but when they're hard. It's about choosing work that aligns with your values, even if it doesn't always impress the crowd. Because doing work that impresses others but empties you isn't success, it's sacrifice. You don't need to have all the answers right now. Most people don't. But you do need to start asking better questions. Questions like, what matters to me? What kind of impact do I want to make? What are the moments in my life when I felt most alive and why? What drains me? Not just physically, but spiritually. These aren't career questions. These are character questions. And when you answer them honestly, you begin to build something rare, inner clarity. That clarity doesn't just help you, it helps everyone around you. Because when you're clear, you communicate differently. You make decisions with more confidence. You stop second-guessing yourself every time someone disagrees. You no longer need to compare your journey to others because you've found your own path. And that's what gives you peace. Finding direction is not a one-time event. It's a practice, a habit, a commitment to stay awake in your own life. The world will constantly try to distract you, to define success for you, to tell you what's impressive and what's not. But it's your job, your real job, to come back to yourself, to ask again and again, is this still true for me? Is this still the path I want to walk? Sometimes the answer will be yes, other times it will be no. And that's okay. In fact, that's growth. Changing direction isn't failure, it's evolution. But you can't evolve if you don't know what you're evolving from. This is why working harder on yourself than your job is so important, because your job will always give you something to do, but it won't always help you become someone. That's your responsibility. To build character, to develop resilience, to nurture integrity, to stay connected to purpose. Especially when the world tempts you with shortcuts, distractions, and praise for things that don't truly matter. There's a reason why some people can go through setbacks and still feel steady, why they lose a job but not their sense of self, why they face failure but not defeat. It's because they're not anchored in outcomes, they're anchored in identity. They've done the inner work. They've asked the hard questions. They've built direction from the inside so the outside can shake but not shatter them. This isn't a call to abandon your job or ignore your responsibilities. It's a call to integrate your inner world with your outer one, to stop living on autopilot and start living on purpose. To remember that your career is part of your life, but not the whole story. That who you are becoming is far more important than what you are producing. You don't need more tasks. You need more truth. You don't need more strategies. You need more self-reflection. You don't need to hustle harder. You need to pause long enough to ask, am I on a path that matters to me? Because the scariest thing is not failure. It's success without fulfillment. Climbing a ladder only to realize it's leaning against the wrong wall. That's what happens when we stop checking in with ourselves, when we let our job define us instead of letting our purpose guide us. So work on yourself. Relentlessly ask the questions no one else is asking. Reflect when others are rushing. Choose the deeper yes instead of the louder applause. Because when you have a direction rooted in values, grounded in self-awareness, and led by purpose, you don't just move, you move with meaning. And in a world obsessed with speed, depth is your greatest advantage. We all want to make a difference. We want to be remembered for something. Whether we say it out loud or not, deep down we hope that our work matters, that our life leaves some kind of mark. That's not ego, it's human. We're wired for contribution. But the truth is, real impact doesn't begin with the work you do. It begins with the person you are. It begins on the inside. You can be the most skilled professional in your field. You can have the resume, the accolades, the promotions. But if you haven't done the work of becoming the kind of person others can trust,